Hello, hello. This is the My Artifact episode number 3900, probably 3960. 60. I'm not really sure. Maybe 70, probably. Okay, yeah. I'm not really sure about the exact number. Okay, yeah. Today's date is March 29, 2026. It's been almost like a night at 10:31 p.m. All right, let's just jump into the question. Let's go. All right, so question is, how can I build a culture in which teachers are respected as professional, supported as learner, held accountable for student progress without creating fear-based administration in Indian education system? Okay, first of all, what exactly is this question and why am I asking this question to myself? Basically, this question is about Indian education system. Why am I asking this question to myself? I want to become education minister of India in the future. And before I wanted to become, I wanted to aware of everything. Okay. So that's why I'm actually asking this question. Like there is lot of stuff to explain. Okay, yeah. Why do you want to become this particular person and that, but I already explained in previous artifact regarding about that, so I will not gonna continue that. Okay. Okay, so regarding about the question says that how can I build a culture which teacher are respected as professional, supported as a learner, and held accountable for student progress without creating fear based administration? This question is actually kind of like a summary. Let me simplify this question in even more simple language. Okay. So in the simple language, okay, in Indian school, how do we make sure teacher are doing the good great job? Like a teacher, okay, sorry, I'm fumbling right now. Okay. In a Indian school, how do we make sure teacher are doing a great job of teaching student while also treating them well, treating them well, helping them improve, and not acting like a strict boss? Okay, that's a really good question. Okay, so basically is this thing na ki it's a kind of like a thing that na ki how do I supposed to kind of like somebody make sure my teacher are kind of like a teaching really well? What is actually the like basically specifically about a teacher training program, like probably like what is actually your guideline? Like what do you think that key teacher should supposed to be behave or teach to a student? First of all is this thing, what is exactly teacher job? Okay, to teach a student, right? Yeah. So how does kind of like a teacher will teach student? Okay, it depends on which subject they are kind of like a teaching. Okay, now another thing. Okay, I will kind of like explain my system, like what kind of like assembly education reforms that I wanted to do. Then I will gonna talk about this thing. Okay. First of all, is that in my education program, my entire education program is actually based on Gurukul program. Okay, like basically my Gurukul program. Okay, yeah. So Gurukul program will implement in entire education system. Okay. In the Gurukul program, every student will kind of like assembly get a tablet. In that tablet, they have an app called Gurukul app. Now, in the Gurukul app, okay, yeah, they have to be kind of like a simply log in and kind of like a continue learning over there. Okay, yeah. I believe that usually when you consume information by yourself, like a self study, you consume more. And this is, I also want that. I also want that my student get more and more information by self study, not by teachers. I want almost like a 60% of their knowledge is actually came from their self study. 40% will kind of like a help by teachers. Okay. Now, basically, which subject are kind of like a something that I could supposed to be like, okay, like basically teaching is a kind of like a very different. Okay. In the mathematics, okay, let's just say math student. Okay. Somewhat something teacher are essential. Okay. But some student are not really understanding some sort of amount of concept, something that, and for that thing app will kind of like understand which student are kind of like a getting difficult. Okay, how does app will understand this thing? So basically what is actually happened? Okay, student will kind of like simply use my application, this Gurukul application, every single day as a homework. They have to perform their homework every single day. Okay, because when they perform they will get the score, and that is very much essential, this score. Okay, because let me tell you one thing, what has actually happened in my Gurukul program. There is no exam at all. No, nothing at all. There is no exam. So basically credibility of student is actually defined by that score, and that score is actually defined by consistent effort. Means consistently that student should supposed to be kind of like a do that homework, okay, every single day. I believe that when you put that consistent effort, you will kind of like improve a lot. And this is, I want that key students should supposed to be kind of like a provide consistent effort. Now why that score is actually important? Okay, so basically is this thing, when you do that consistent effort, you open this application, you kind of like perform this kind of like a this and that and that and that, like whatever the app kind of like simply tell you question, you actually answer given then that and that. Okay, so basically app will understand you, that key what kind of like a person you are, what kind of person you are, means like what kind of like a simply credibility of you have, like are you good at which subject, maths, history, science, physics, everything. Okay, app will try to understand that. Okay, when you complete your this homework you will get score. Okay, you will get score, and that score will kind of like somebody define how good is you are. Okay, because that score is actually matter. Let me tell you one thing, my Gurukul program does not stop. Like basically does not stop means what, it does not finish. Like basically in conventional method of education, usually after the graduation education stop, but that is not in my Gurukul program. Education does not gonna stop. Nah, it will continue for rest of the lifetime. Yeah, but why? Okay, and also is this thing, why the student will kind of like a go to the school for rest of the time? Like no, they will not gonna go to the school rest of the lifetime. Okay, let me tell you one thing, how is actually happen. Okay, so basically is this thing, my Gurukul program is actually initiate from 5th standard. Okay, from the 5th standard student will kind of like a came to the Gurukul. Now Gurukul is a kind of like a place where you have boys hostel, girls hostel, school, mess, library, okay, playground and things and that and that. Okay, and they will kind of like stay there, live there. Okay, I don't want my students should supposed to be get out from that Gurukul. Okay, obviously in the weekend they will kind of like go to their parents to things and that, but they will kind of like stay in that school, stay in that Gurukul. Why? Because of that key, first of all I will not gonna take any kind of like a fees to any student, nothing at all, it's free of cost. But one of the really essential is this thing, it is my responsibility that ki those students are really good at something. Okay, and this is a kind of like a goal that I have. Now because of every student are actually performing that homework in that application, which is kind of like a somewhat something I understand that, but kind of like a knowledge is not the only one thing, because application is a kind of like a provide just a knowledge. Okay, it does not kind of like a help you to exercise and things like that. exercise is very essential for mental growth. Okay, so it is really essential for me that ki my students should supposed to be kind of like a have a kind of like a participation or in a sports or any other physical activity. Okay, and this is where kind of like a really essential for me that they should supposed to be kind of like a stay in the Gurukul. Okay, as well as I will kind of like a provide the meal, kind of like a dinner, things and that, so that I will control their that key they will kind of like get the proper meal and things and that. Okay, but why? Okay, like does student will not gonna get that particular meal in their home? Okay, the problem is that basically is this thing. What exactly I wanted to what is exactly my goal? My goal is that ki those student when they kind of like live together, there is no up and down, there is no rich person, there is no poor person, everyone will gonna same. Okay, the way that they do, the way that they study, the way that they kind of like eat together, stay together, they are together, there is no kind of like assembly higher and lower and things and that. So this problem he actually solved. Second problem. Second problem is that ki I wanted to nurture those students since the beginning of the life. Okay, like I wanted to ready for those students that how brutal the life was. Okay, let me tell you one thing what exactly what I'm trying to tell you. When students are kind of like a living with their parents, parents are kind of like a simply pampered. Okay, they are kind of like a simply pampered means like that they are kind of like a simply making their life is much more easier and things and that. Whatever the kind of like a simply kids want, parents are actually provided. Okay, but they didn't really get the growth, they didn't really get the kind of like a simply growth of outside. Let me tell you one thing, outside growth means what? When you are kind of like a went outside means away from your home, you realize that how the world is actually happening, how the people are actually exist, what kind of like a things actually happen and things and that. As well as parents will not gonna kind of like simply help you for rest of the lifetime. Somewhere in some sort of amount of time, you will kind of like face the world regarding about every category of the people and things and that. I wanted to give them training since the beginning, since when they are kind of like entering in the Gurukul, those student will kind of like introduce with the different kind of like assembly student things and that. Okay, obviously there is no parents at all, so they will start kind of like living by themselves. They will kind of like create their own identity. Okay, they will not become a kind of like assembly son of somebody or daughter of somebody. No, they will kind of like create their own identity in the Gurukul. Okay, and they will also understand the how the world works and things and that. Like what I'm trying to tell you is this thing, when you are kind of like living with your like-minded people or something like that ki like associate with the people, you actually grow more. Okay, so this is the kind of like a things that I don't want that students should supposed to be kind of like a go home. I want my students should supposed to be stay in the Gurukul. Okay, and also is this thing, when I'm controlling their time, I will kind of like make them much more better regarding about when they will go to the school, when they will kind of like do the kind of like a physical activity or exercise or sports or anything at all. Okay, when they kind of like eat, what kind of like a stuff they eat. Okay, so that basically is this thing, because these are student are not student as well, these are the citizen for the future of India. Okay, so I have to be kind of like a treat them like them, like what kind of like a simply the problem that you will gonna face in the future, and I wanted to train them since the beginning. So this is a kind of like simply Gurukul. Okay, and they will kind of like get all those things. Okay, now like sometime I kind of like simply talk about off the topic. Okay, so the question is actually about that ki how does teacher will kind of like a teach a student. Okay, first of all is that I already explained regarding about that ki my student will kind of like simply getting knowledge more by themselves. I believe in self study. When the student are kind of like doing the self study, they are kind of like equipped with more information, more knowledge by themselves. Okay, but some sort of subject are really required a kind of like assembly teacher intervention. What are those subjects? Those subjects are history, social science and things and that. Now basically in this particular context, okay, yeah, teacher have to use a storytelling point of perspective to kind of like simply explain their entire scene or scenario or lecture or kind of like a lesson. Okay, let me clarify regarding about another. Okay, like basically is this thing, it's not about kind of like simply just a teaching. Like let me tell you one thing. Okay, if you are like the problem is that na ki most of people actually think that na ki how should we supposed to make the teaching as good as possible as it can. So most of the kind of like people might gonna say, okay, we might kind of like a teach like this or teach like that or teach like this, so it would be kind of like a much more better and things and that, but that is completely wrong. Okay, like basically is this thing na, let me kind of like simply give you a context. Okay, let me kind of like simply, okay, every teacher are wanted to teach nicely. Like basically is this thing, if someone is a kind of like a teacher is not teaching wisely, does that particular teacher does not know that he knew that thing. Okay, yeah, then why does kind of like a teacher teaching not really well, is because of another things. Like basically is this thing now, in conventional method of teaching process, there are a lot of paperwork to do, absent things and that and that and that, checking the paper, taking unit tests, whatnot. So basically the teacher, most of the teacher energy is actually kind of like a spend on the paperwork and things and that, and because of they kind of like a spend almost like a 70-80% of their energy for kind of like a doing the paperwork. How much energy that they have? 20%. So when they have very less amount of energy, so that how they should supposed to teach student, because in conventional method of like a conventional method of Indian education system are kind of like a be more focused on lot of paperwork and things and that and that. Okay, in my Gurukul program there is no paperwork, there is nothing really at all. Even if like a basically is this thing, the teacher who are kind of like a teaching a student, those are very selected teacher, sorry, those are very selected student. Okay, let me tell you how is actually happening. Okay, first of all there is no exam at all, so there is no kind of like a simply tension for teacher to complete the syllabus and things and that. No, nothing really at all. Another thing, okay, teacher are kind of like a be more in my Gurukul program, teacher are kind of like a bit more focus on how they should supposed to be teach. Teaching is a art form, is not a profession, it's an art form. It's a kind of like a how should you supposed to be sell your story to the kind of like those peoples, those students and things and that. Okay, in my Gurukul program, as I mentioned, there is no paperwork at all. Teacher will not gonna do any kind of like a paperwork, or maybe very less paperwork. Okay, I think that now like basically I was kind of like thinking about that, ki probably a TA would be much more better. Okay, what's a TA? TA means teacher assistant. Okay, like every teacher has its own assistant, a kind of like a teacher who has an experienced teacher, and then there is an assistant teacher. Okay, assistant teacher will kind of like simply assist that teacher like regarding about paperwork and things and that. Okay, but also is this thing that assistant teacher will also become someday a teacher. Okay, so that assistant teacher will also get the experience from that senior and things and that. So having that assistant teacher would be much more better for exposure of kind of like a senior teacher and things and that. Okay, now senior teacher have a kind of like a responsibility of how they should supposed to be teach. Okay, teach means what? Like basically is this thing na ki like I don't know at the moment, but if I have to be ask myself that how do I supposed to be teach student, so how do I will teach the student? Okay, first of all I will kind of like simply use storytelling. Okay, storytelling is a kind of like simply is this thing that I'm really good at. Okay, and I'm kind of like simply explain the stuff regarding about how things happen. Let's just say I will gonna teaching about a Stalingrad. Okay, in World War II, Stalingrad, this happened. Okay, I wanted to explain this thing in kind of like a simply my storytelling kind of like a simply execution. Another thing, usually I will gonna use visual graphics, images. These are very much essential because I want my teacher should supposed to be imagine, or like imagine the scene that what exactly happened in Stalingrad and things and that and that. So basically I wanted to kind of like let them kind of like somebody show the images and things like that, so that people will understand. Okay, yeah. I also want to add a movement. Okay, a movement means what? I want that ki basically is this thing, when I said something, like it just not just kind of like a me talking. I wanted that students should supposed to be talk. So that is called movement. Okay, yeah. I wanted that both party, like basically the students and teacher, both are communicate to understand this particular concept. Okay, yeah. A kind of like simply communication, not just one way around. Okay. Another thing, what I will gonna do is that I will compliment my student as much as it possible. Okay, and also remember their name, because let me tell you one thing: when you remember their name and when you compliment, those student will kind of like assembly motivate more to kind of like assembly understand the concept and things and that and that. Okay, yeah. These are kind of like a things that I will kind of like assembly try to tell my story or tell my concept as much as easy, as much as possible as it can. Okay, so this is how I will. Now basically is this thing na ki this is just a kind of like it's only my guideline, like this is how I kind of like only teach my student. Okay, yeah. But what I think is that na ki like this is kind of like a only concept that like basically I wanted that ki my teacher should supposed to teach like that way, but I don't know the how they will gonna perform. Okay, why? Because I still don't know how I will perform, because I haven't really teach any kind of like a student till now. Okay, yeah. Because like basically the stuff that I'm saying right now and the stuff that I will gonna perform is a very much different na. Like I'm just kind of like saying things. I don't know that when I will gonna teach student, how will I supposed to be perform. I don't know that. The ground reality of this thing I am not really sure. So probably talking about this thing, it just like it doesn't really make sense at all. But there is a couple of things that I will definitely gonna do. Okay, yeah. First of all is that less paperwork I will definitely gonna do. Also another thing is that key making sure that teacher are kind of like a teaching well by kind of like a using compliment or remember student name or things and that and that. Okay, yeah. Add activity movement. Okay, yeah, which is also really good, but still is this thing that key again. Okay, yeah, I don't really have any kind of like experience regarding about teaching, so probably at that time, at this time, I don't know how do I supposed to kind of like like I don't know how like understanding the gravity. Okay, how do I supposed to kind of like explain this stuff, right? So yeah, this is what. Okay, all right. But there is a kind of like a couple of things. The pointers are actually here, and I wanted to talk about that. Okay, yeah. First point. Okay, respected as a professional. Oh, that is really good thing. Okay, yeah. I wanted my teacher should supposed to be respected. Yeah, like basically, yeah, like basically teacher are kind of like somebody very respected. Is it? Well, basically no. In conventional method, like ask anyone today, like no one wants to become a teacher. Okay, why? Because very less respect are actually exist for a teacher. I want it to be respected. Now basically is this thing respect means what? Like that's a kind of like something very different. Okay, let me kind of like explain. Okay, respect means like that. Let's just say a teacher are kind of like asking a question. Okay, what's the molecular formula for water? And kind of like it's only one person kind of like simply raise a hand. Okay, yeah. And teacher say yeah, and that particular person, like that particular student, will kind of like simply just sitting. He was not standing, he was just sitting there and kind of like say, sir, H2O. Now he did answer correct, but that is a very unrespected way. Let me tell you why. Okay, so basically this thing I want my teacher getting respected. Okay, in this simple conversation, let me kind of like explain what exactly happened. Okay, in US or Europe, probably student are just argue with their teacher, or student are not giving the respect to a teacher, or student are kind of like a giving the answer without even standing. Okay, so what is actually happened when stuff happened? Like talk about simple thing. When the student are actually giving the right answer, but they are not standing, they just kind of like a sitting on the desk. They just lift the hand and they just send kind of like a say, yeah, this is the kind of like answer. When it kind of like a say this thing, what is actually happen? It's not really good thing for building a relationship between teacher and student. Let me kind of like simply tell you something. Okay, I want teacher should supposed to be friend with their student. Okay, yeah. But I also want that student should supposed to be get respected for teacher. Okay, yeah. Like basically it's this thing. A teacher should supposed to be kind of like a somebody like a have a friendship relationship, but student should supposed to feel as a respect relationship. Respect. Okay, like why are you kind of like focus on respect and things and that? Okay, let me kind of like give you from this scenario. Okay, let's talk about this thing. Teacher asks student what is a molecular formula for water. One student kind of like assembly say raise up the hand. He just sitting there and he says, sir, H2O. Okay, what's wrong in that thing? Okay, now let me tell you what's wrong in that thing. Okay, so basically is this thing, when that student will kind of like sit and just give the answer, what is actually happened that ki it is became that ki student is not that much responsible. Okay, let me kind of like simply clarify what is actually happened. Okay, when that student will kind of like simply stand up and say H2O. Oh yeah, so what is actually meaning of that stand up? Okay, like what is actually is this thing? Okay, so when the student is actually stand up, he represent that he knows the answer. Okay, yeah. And how does I highlight when he knows when he knows that thing? Because he stand up na, he stand up and kind of like somebody say H2 and things and that. Like let me kind of like somebody clarify in this particular topic. Okay, when a particular person knows something, that particular person should supposed to be get rewarded. Okay, let's just say a teacher asks a kind of like a simple question, what is a molecular formula for water? This student kind of like knows that H2O. Now basically I wanted to highlight that student. And how do I supposed to be highlight that student? It will never gonna highlight and if he just kind of like a sitting and that's because what is actually happened now, let me kind of like a clarify. Okay, when the student is kind of like stand up and say H2O, what is actually happened? It creates a ripple effect to other student that key they should supposed to be give the answer. Why? Because they will kind of like a stand and they will kind of like a stand up and give the answer. Okay, and when they will kind of like a stand up, they kind of like a feel highlighted in the class. Okay, highlighted. Let me tell you one thing, when you are stand up, rest of the student are actually sit down, you are highlighted na. Okay, yeah. And after that, a teacher who kind of like giving the compliment, that's exactly right, thank you, what's your name? My name Ashish. Thank you Ashish, please sit down. Like basically this is what exactly happened na. Every student wants that compliment, that compliment. I wanted that. Like basically when I became a teacher too, when I will kind of like a teacher class, I wanted to give that compliment with their name. Okay, yeah, like a good work teacher, like a good work Ashish, you did something really good. Okay, yeah. Because let me tell you one thing now, in India compliments are very rare. Literally just like you don't really get any compliment at all. Like last time you remember when you get any compliment? Nothing really at all. Okay, yeah. I wanted that a teacher should supposed to give the compliment to a student, not too much, but a kind of like a somebody just kind of like like basically is this in a teacher should supposed to understand that how much compliment should they supposed to be give, understand the consequences, understand the methodology, and kind of like a somebody understand the like it's a kind of like a thing you will gonna understand like how much kind of like a compliment should supposed to give. Try not to do kind of like a too much like a Like basically just little bit butter would be kind of like a much more look really good in the jam and things. Too much butter is just like So this is what it is. Apply little bit butter on student, because sometimes students wants that key a teacher should supposed to be remember their name and things and that and that. And for that they will kind of like get the compliment, because every student wants that ki they should supposed to get respected. And if that respect is actually came from the teacher, student will eager to want to kind of like get that respect. So this is what exactly want. Okay, yeah. If the student is actually stand and teacher will kind of like give the compliment, like that's right, Gaurav. That's exactly right answer. Okay, yeah. So basically, it's this thing that it just like it creates the ripple effect, and another student will also give the answer when teacher kind of like ask another question. Multiple hand will gonna raise. That creates movement. And that creates communication. Even if answer is wrong, still that particular person try. Teacher should supposed to compliment that thing, because like let me tell you one thing there are very less people who are kind of like somebody establish themselves or try to showcase their anything. Okay, yeah. Let me tell you one thing. Okay, so this is kind of like a very much said, even if the student is actually wrong, compliment them that key they are kind of like a courageous enough to kind of like raise their hand and things and that, because that's very essential. With their name, that's essential, because it creates that ripple effect. Okay, yeah, everyone was wrong, there is no kind of like a right in this world and things and that, just kind of like a make them acceptable, make them kind of like a feel really good and things and that. Okay, yeah. Now what will happen, that student just kind of like sit there and give the answer. When this actually happened, basically this thing, it represents that student will not gonna give the respect. Why? Because he was kind of like standing there and give the answer. It represents that he student just kind of like getting the information and teacher are kind of like doing the job, and that is not good. That is not good. Okay, because what will gonna happen? Okay, yeah. In the school, he just kind of like somebody. Okay, yeah. It does not like basically he just kind of like stand there. Okay, yeah. It does not create that ripple effect. Okay, let me kind of like give you. Okay, so what exactly happen? Let's just say a student will kind of like stand up. He says, "Sir H2O." Sir kind of like a teacher kind of like give the compliment to the student. Okay, yeah. Now it creates the ripple effect, and another people are kind of like try to do this thing because for the compliment. Okay, yeah. But what if the student who kind of like give the answer by just sitting there and say H2O, and then student receive the compliment, that compliment feel fake. Like same compliment, like the same compliment kind of like creates the ripple effect that another people wants to. But if that particular student standing and he kind of like getting that compliment, it felt like that it's kind of like a too easy. Okay, too easy. Okay, yeah. So when it became too easy, then he will not gonna kind of like respect that student. He will gonna say, oh ye to aisa hi hai. Like basically he just kind of like giving me a kind of like a simply compliment just for I'm just saying H2 and things and that. Okay, yeah. So do you understand? It's a kind of like a thing. It just yeah. Like I don't know how to supposed to explain. Like basically in India, we are in Indian culture, we have kind of like we put our teacher as a kind of like a guru. Okay, yeah. Like we place a kind of like somebody is this thing na ki like a higher than, like basically is this thing na, the first guru or first teacher in our life is your mother. Okay, yeah. Second is your father, and third is your guru and your teacher. Okay, yeah. So basically this thing in our Indian culture, it is very how that kind of like give the respect to a teacher and things and that. Okay, yeah. And I wanted to continue that legacy because it is really good to have that. I want that a kind of like somebody teacher should supposed to become a friend with the student, but student should supposed to be have the respect for the teacher. It's essential. It's very very essential. Okay, yeah. That's why in India we have kind of like a really good relationship. Like I'm not gonna say this thing, but still, like basically this thing, like there is kind of like a lot of thing. Like basically this thing now in US and Europe, the relation between the teacher and student are just not so good. I don't know, but I might be a kind of like a wrong with that statement too. I'm not really sure, but this is what I want. Okay, this is what I want. I want that students should supposed to be kind of like a stand and kind of like somebody give the answer, sir. This is the kind of like a things that and that. Okay, because it kind of like a somebody is this thing that key teacher also get the respect and teacher also give the compliment, and that kind of like a creates the ripple effect. Other another people are also kind of like a give the answer. For that they will kind of like a get the compliment. Like this is the kind of like things that I want. Okay, yeah. Now next topic is that supported as a learner. Okay, yeah. Okay, so give teacher the help of training they need, get better teaching without making them feel stupid for not knowing everything. Like teacher already knew this thing. Like basically this is every teacher are kind of like a somebody like a do kind of like a little bit of practice regarding about that what they will kind of like how they will continue their classes and things and that probably. Okay, so it might be not that much bigger issue, but something is that na ki like okay, let me kind of like some this thing. This is a kind of like a very crucial point. Okay, yeah. It depends on person. Okay, yeah. Like not teacher, a person, how that particular person handle that thing. Okay, let me kind of like tell you the scenario. Let's just say a teacher who kind of like a teaching something, and probably he might kind of like somebody wrong at some time. Oh yeah. So basically wrong means like that. Now let's just say that key like I was kind of like a teaching something like that. And I will gonna say this thing, same concept, Stalingrad. Okay, yeah. So basically I will gonna say this thing in the Stalingrad, there is a kind of like a somebody Italian soldier and German soldier are fight along with each other. That's a completely wrong. Like no, not Italian soldier, a kind of like a somebody Red Army, Soviet soldier. Okay, yeah. But I was wrong. Okay, so that is kind of like mistake is actually happen. Okay, yeah. So basically is this thing, na? Okay. Teacher is also human to make mistakes too. Simple as that thing. Okay, yeah. But if the teacher who kind of like a really good at communication and things and that, you can like change that thing very easily. Like basically, oh, oh, sorry. I thought that now you are kind of like a really good student. Like even if I make mistake, you just still continue and agree with me. Are you not really focusing on my work? Okay, yeah. Okay, just tell me what I did something wrong. And teacher say, oh, sorry, everything is right. Okay, everything is right. Like, do you really think Stalingrad is actually happened that ki Italian soldier and German soldier fight along with this thing? Huh? Yes, sir. You said it. Like, are you think that is true? Uh then they look at the textbook. No, sir, that is wrong. Like basically German soldier and Russian soldier, they are kind of like a fight along in the Stalingrad. Oh, that is the thing. Okay. So this is what it is. Like basically is this thing na ki like basically is this thing fuck up actually happen. Okay, when the teaching actually thing, how do you supposed to kind of like simply create this diversion to kind of like simply make it but funny or kind of like a simply is this thing, or I don't know how you supposed to do that thing. Okay, just kind of like a divert. I don't know how it depends on person, how that particular person kind of like a shifted. Like basically teacher shouldn't supposed to say, oh, गलती होगी मेरे से, then I will kind of like sit payus and things and that. Just not, just like you are teaching, you are kind of like a you are kind of like a shining. So probably keep shining. Okay, even if you're wrong, just sometime kind of like a fuck up. But still it's just thing be change. Okay. Read books by the way. Really good. Like basically this is thing na. I'm reading this kind of like a book, How to Win and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. Really amazing book. Okay, yeah. Like they have kind of like a lot of technique regarding about how should you supposed to kind of like assembly like execute any kind of like things when you are kind of like stuck in that particular situation and things and that. Okay. Held accountable for student progress. Oh, okay, yeah. Okay, let me tell you one thing. In my Gurukul program, teacher are not accountable for student progress. Student progress are completely depend on student. That is completely true because I already explained. Teacher are not responsible. Teacher are kind of like only teaching as much as best is possible. Okay, huh? If the student is not like basically this thing, na, like let me tell you one thing. My Gurukul program is kind of like understanding student regarding about what they good at and what they good not. Okay, yeah, so this is what it is. Okay, so no one will gonna, there is no pass and fail in this, in my Gurukul program. There is no exam, there is no pass, there is no fail, just a score. Okay, that's it. You just have to continue to do your homework, you will get the score and things like that and that. Okay, yeah. So when there is no pass, when there is no fail, so who will be accountable for? No one. Yeah, that's it. Okay, yeah. Like basically, this is in our Indian culture, in our Indian, sorry, in the Indian education system, we have this pass, fail, and things and that and that. Why do we have that thing? It doesn't really require, literally, just doesn't really require at all. You just kind of like teach the student very much properly and things and that they will understand. That's it. And consistent effort is a kind of like a, that's it. My app will kind of like a telling regarding about that, and also my app is kind of like a try to understand that particular person. Like, is that particular person good at something or what? Like, is this particular person really good at history, social science, maths, or physics, or things and that and that? So this is what it is. Every person kind of like very much different. Oh yeah. So probably is this thing that key accountability or whole accountability of the student progress is like this point will not gonna exist in my Gurukul program probably. Without creating fear-based administration, doing all above without principal consultancy and threatening, shouting, and okay, yeah, this is a kind of like a really one thing that I wanted to talk about. Okay, yeah. Okay, so basically this thing na, okay, when teacher are kind of like a teaching, okay, are teaching their stuff, okay, teacher should supposed to be in that particular mindset for as a teacher. Okay, yeah. Let me kind of like a scenario what exactly happened. When I was in 11th standard, one student are kind of like a creating argument to a teacher, and teacher are take that personally. Okay, yeah. But that student it also kind of like a, he also take that personally and he just, yeah. Then literally my teacher was a female. Okay, yeah. And basically it's just the gap between the, like basically this is, yeah, let me tell you one thing. Okay, yeah. So in the 11th standard, our age was almost like a probably like a 17. Okay, yeah, 17. Okay, yeah. And my teacher was like basically our teacher was also a graduate. Like her age probably maybe just like maybe 22 or 23. Okay, yeah. But because of my friend who is kind of like somebody really good at talking and things, an argument, and the teacher who is female, and that female teacher are also kind of like a very shy and things and that and that. So basically, that my friend who is a student who is a kind of like a yelling at teacher and things, an argument went, oh my god, literally. Teacher has started crying because of student are kind of like doing argument. Yeah, principal intervene everything and things that happen. Oh my god, this is kind of like a very crazy happened too. Okay, yeah. So let me tell you one thing. Make sure environment should supposed to be create light. Okay, like this is what teaching is about. Okay, yeah. Teaching is a craft. Like basically it's a kind of like art form, as I explained, is an art form. Okay, yeah. And you are the control of that art form. A teacher should be control that art form. That is what it is. Make the kind of like environment little bit smoothie, nice, comfortable. Okay, yeah. Watch Khan sir videos. Khan sir videos, the way that that particular person teach, oh my god, he creates a kind of like such an environment that kind of like a little bit of kind of like a comfortable, funny and things and that and that. Like I learned a lot of technique from the way that he taught. It's really good, really great. Okay, yeah. So make sure that situation intact. Okay, yeah. Okay, some certain point things might be heat up. Okay, yeah, like basically students are not actually giving the proper answer or kind of like a things and that and that. Okay, yeah. Do not put yourself into that situation or do not put your student into that situation that you are kind of like somebody very angry and things and that and that. Okay, yeah. Sometime it might go okay, but not. Most of the time not. Just be light. Just be kind of like a bit really comfortable. Even if they fail, just okay, try again. Okay, try again. Okay, yeah. Let them kind of like understand, make it simple things and that, add a movement, add a kind of like a small conversation and things and that, give the compliment, probably. Okay, yeah. Argument don't do, but if you intervene the argument, then probably it will kind of like a become something different. It's not become a teacher, it's a kind of like a became a kind of like a small debate. And I don't want a debate in the classroom. Like I want debate in like a with student to student. Like one student are kind of like a debating another student. That is good, okay, but I don't want debate between student and teacher. That's not okay. Yeah. So yeah. So this is a kind of like all the kind of like some teacher protocol regarding about how they should supposed to teach and things and that and that. But still, I think that I'm not really sure about this particular process at the moment. All right. So this is it. I should supposed to be end here, and thank you.